Good evening, and thanks for joining tonight. This is our well, we've done this quite a few times. Oh, I totally just deleted them. Oh my gosh. Here we go. Hold on, let me pull this back up. Episode 171. My topic title. I had to actually go back and search this to make sure we haven't done this before because we've done quite a few podcasts that kind of revolve around the same subject, but I want to kind of talk about the issue of meaning and without being, gimmicky or, I'm not just trying to say this to sound flowery or, philosophical or anything like that, but like what about meaning does man overlook or not understand? And I want to kind of touch on three main questions, and we can kind of pick at each one of those questions one at a time. But in way of an illustration or kind of a, sending us in the right direction, I remember reading a while back, and I kind of went back and researched this a little bit deeper, reading about Vincent van Gogh. And this is a painter in the 1800s who, if you know, well, you don't even really have to know painting and art to have heard the name Van
Yeah.
Gogh. It's a very well-known name, and his paintings today are considered some of the most valuable pieces of art in existence. And during his lifetime, he created like 2,000 pieces of art that, I don't know how well tracked all 2,000 pieces are, but today, or when they were sold, last some of the highest purchases that were made for these were made in the 80s and 90s, and one in 2017. But just to give you a range, $53 million for one in 1987 would have been the equivalent with inflation today would have been about $150 million equivalent. In 1990, another one of his paintings sold for 82.5 million. Today, that'd be worth about 190 to 200 million. And another one was sold for 71.5 million in 1998. In 2017, somebody purchased one of his paintings for 81.3 million. Today, that'd be about 105 million dollars for one painting. And so it just gives you this, like, scale. And I understand, for most that, thinking about numbers for a piece of painting like that is like, that's unheard of. It's not that we can't compute paying that much for a painting, but they're considered pretty priceless. You can't really, people are buying them because they are priceless for what they are. But during this guy's life, he only sold one painting. And I actually didn't know this about him, but he died at the age of 37 by suicide. And during the majority of his adult life, this guy spent all of his time painting. His brother supported him financially. He had no income. He struggled with depression. He struggled with relationship problems. He struggled with romantic relationship problems. He couldn't keep friendships together, in other words. And so he was kind of a loner. He was very isolated. Struggled with substance abuse. And like I said, he shot himself at 37 years old in the chest. So you could say he didn't even successfully kill himself. It took him 2 days to
Yeah.
die. And so his last words, though, were another thing I didn't know about his life. His last words were to his brother, who was there at his side when he died. He said, "The sadness will last forever." Those were his last words.
Mm-hmm.
And so, on the one hand, there's a truth to be said about how there are certain things we live for that might not find their real true value until we die.
Yeah.
Right? There is a
Yeah.
lesson there. But I can't help but think about that story and, try to pick up another hand in the lesson and say, what a sad thing to live your entire life for something that means absolutely nothing for you personally. Your whole life spent, and there's no benefit to you whatsoever. Your life is not abundant. Your life is not happy. Everything you've lived for really meant nothing. And later on, people decide your paintings are worth a ton of money. But what does that mean for him, right? And so the reason I share that and the reason why I bring that up is because I've been thinking a lot about this issue of a meaningful life and living a life that genuinely does matter, and not just from the standpoint of, a one day idea, but a today thing where you're finding meaning in your own life today, where you can say my life matters. And so I want to kind of delve into that question of how do you know your life matters, because I think that first off, the existence of the need for meaning in every single individual is real. I think that's a thing that is there. Every single person has something in them that desires to mean something and for their life to matter. And whether people pursue that or whether people actually put, feet on that need and try to pursue fulfilling it is a different conversation. But to talk about, first off, one is just talking about the fact that it exists and, essentially proving it. Like, yes, everybody has this, or maybe not everybody has it, but I believe everybody does. So maybe I'm wrong or I'm overthinking it. But the second is, why is the need for meaning significant to our existence? And then second, or finally, third is why does that need exist in the first place? Where did it come from? And so I guess I'll just stop there before we even get to the questions. What are your initial thoughts right off the bat?
Well, the first thought that came into my mind was the idea of, talking about somebody who didn't benefit from their own life, and yet what they did, the work that they did, once it fell into the hands of others, became valuable. And that really is the truth. Nearly everybody, maybe not everybody, but nearly everybody is more valuable dead than they were alive. And I think a lot of the reason is because the only thing that's left of them is what they left behind for others. Because all the things that they did for themselves are gone. That's all gone. The places they've traveled to, the memories, all the memories of what they've done in life are all gone. Memories of themselves are all gone. The only thing that's left is the memories that other people have, or the works that were done for other people. And so the first thought that came into my mind when you're talking about that is just thinking about, that's why it's so important to live for others now while you're alive, because that's what gives meaning to life, is living for others. So if he, because I was thinking about, painting, he's, even if he lived to be, 30, 40, 50 years longer, he still probably would have struggled all the rest of his life selling his paintings because of the kind of person that he was. But if he just decided that he was just going to paint and just enjoy life, and he was just going to give those paintings away to other people, he probably could have sold some of them, not for the kind of money that that they get now, but enough to maybe live off of.
Yeah.
If his goal was not to live off of his painting, but his goal was to use his painting to please others, how different things would have been. And I think that's a real life principle that many people don't understand, but should, because we have so much proof of it. Over the years, it's after people die that we find out what their true life, what their true meaning, what their true value was. Comes after they die, but we don't know what that value is until we get a chance to estimate what they have done, that they've left behind, the legacy that they've left behind. And so that's what you're looking at, when you're looking at, Van Gogh paintings. It's like it's not just Van Gogh paintings. There was a creativity to it. There's a uniqueness.
Yeah,
all those kinds of things that are there, that are his fingerprint. So it's not like people who go to college or whatever learn how to paint. or get together, on the weekend. You get, a bunch of people get together, paint, have special, clubs, painting clubs where they get together and they paint, and everybody's learning techniques and things like that and sharing techniques with each other. But that it's not the same thing,
No.
that it's his ability, and that if he had coupled that together with others, how different things could have been, like, because some of the things you mentioned is difficulties with the relationships,
Mhm.
the idea of be able to find a girl that would spend her life with him, that just gives you a picture of the kind of, because it's not all about being attractive, physically attractive, in life. You can be physically attractive and have a terrible personality, and you're not going to gain attention for very long. It's amazing to me. There's these, you see these women, actresses and things like that, and they're amazing, on stage. They're attractive. They're, stunning, but single. But why? Well, because you have to just have a conversation with them to find out why. They're not focused on other people. They're focused on themselves and trying to figure out why in the world nobody's paying more attention to them. So that's my kind of first thoughts, is the idea of your value being seen in others. That's where you're going to measure your value.
So I was asking you some questions about this story in the Bible before we get to the direct questions, because it does actually touch on this idea of meaning and, living a life that matters. There's a story in the Bible. There's three gospels that actually give an account to this incident, that a man walks up to Jesus, and when you put the three stories together, you can gather that this guy was wealthy, he was young, and he was apparently some sort of ruler or in some kind of leadership role. And he asks Jesus this question. He says, "Good master, or good teacher, what must I do to enter or to inherit the kingdom of heaven? What good thing must I do to inherit the kingdom of heaven?" And Jesus says, immediately Jesus says to him, keep the commandments. And, he says, in response, "All these things I've kept from my youth." And so obviously this has been some form of discipline or practice in his life. He's clearly, seemingly Jewish, and he's kept these things as they would have probably, he probably was a good young Jewish boy growing up. But then he says, so he tells Jesus, "All these things I've kept from my youth." But then he says these words, "What do I still lack?" And I can't help but read that and think that in this guy's life of accomplishment, clearly, he sees something lacking, feels something lacking. And so for all intents and purposes, you could look at this guy and say he is what a lot of people strive to be. He's got position, he's got wealth, and he even has youth on his side. And he's religiously devout in one way or another.
Yeah.
But still something's lacking. Now, what is it? Now, we're delving into this first question, is, does the need for meaning exist in every person? Do you think that this man was just, he was raised in the right atmosphere, and so the idea of heaven and stuff like that was just so familiar that he felt this, compelling need to go talk to Jesus personally and say, "Hey, look, am I missing something here? Do I have it all together?" Or do you think that there's something, deeper in this guy that's prompting the question?
Well, yeah, there has to be, because the Bible gives us all these little clues along the way, is that he came running to Jesus. He's a rich man, he's a ruler. Rich rulers don't run. What are they running for? They have other people run for them.
Yeah.
And but yet he's running. Is obviously in some kind of state of mind. It's funny because working with people a lot, as I do as a pastor, it's interesting how people can, once they get something in their head, it's got to be done right now, because it's an emergency, because it's so important to them. But they're not looking at it from the standpoint of the rest of the world. They're just looking at it from the standpoint of themselves. It's like, this is urgent, and they'll pick up the phone and call somebody, and not and think, oh, I didn't realize it was 2 o'clock in the morning, because it's important. It's important. I'm going to call somebody right now. Not it's important. It's 2 in the morning. They're probably asleep. I don't care. This is very important. I mean, just literally doing it, without even thinking through the process. And that's kind of the feeling I get of this guy, is this guy's not thinking through the process. Jesus is nearby. He's taking advantage of the opportunity to see Jesus, because he has a moment to where he can see Jesus, and he wants to capitalize on this and get his conscience cleared. And so, but he doesn't. And he walks away. The Bible says he walks away sorrowful. So it's quite clear that he knew he was in a desperate situation, but he was hoping that Jesus would be able to tell him what that desperate situation was, and he was hoping after Jesus told him what it was that there could be something else, so that he didn't have to do that. But that's the reality of it. I think is that he was definitely in desperation. This wasn't just just checking how things are going.
So let's answer the question then. Does this need exist in everybody? The need to matter.
At one time it did. Maybe it doesn't. Yeah, over the years, I've always thought that. I thought that when I became a Christian, because that was how I became a Christian. I became a Christian with the revelation of a need that I didn't even know that I had, and that when that need I became aware of that need, and then that need was met in Jesus. It was like, wow, this is a double blessing, because it wasn't just that my need was met, it's that I didn't even know what my need was. And it was the desire for meaning. I would always ask the question to myself and even to other people, there must be more to life than what we're doing. Because there had to be, it was like, this can't be all there is to life. Life just cannot be just simply, getting into some kind of routine and filling that routine every day. And so I think it's there. I think it can die. I think that's the thing that I've realized, is that in being a pastor, is that some people, they lose that. They don't think about actually having purpose anymore. You can come to a place to where you lose that, which makes for a very sad life. It's probably where Van Gogh was, more than likely.
So is that something you think people lose at a young age, or just now you're born?
No, I don't think
meaning?
I don't think you lose it at an age. I think you lose it based on how life is going.
So what I mean by age is like over like a progression of your own life. Like, it's not something you're just born and you don't have a sense of meaning. Or do you think everybody's born with it, or is this?
Well, yeah,
is it innate, or is it something
I
that's?
don't know that it's even something that's born with. My personal opinion, and that's obviously not something that really matters all that much, but my personal opinion is that it's something that God births in us. It's not like just a hardwired thing. I think it's part of relationship with God, is God inciting us into relationship by meeting with us early on in our lives with the idea of purpose, the sense of purpose, the sense of destiny. And so I think it's more that than it is this idea of a sense of purpose. I don't think I have a sense of purpose. I have a sense of purpose. What should I do with this? As much as this reality that this almost third party experience that your life has purpose and meaning.
So give me some examples of, like, what that purpose looks like at a practical level. And some of the stuff that I was thinking about was like, God is set life up in such a way that it's easy. We've talked about this before, the whole division of like, this is God's, area and category of expertise. And then there's like the world, and they're just two separate, existences. But
I'm
But
not sure what you mean by that
hold on.
because that is, yes, we did talk about that and talked about how that wasn't true.
Exactly. I was
So,
just going to say, no. I was just going to.
so it's like, where are you going?
This is why you have to let me keep going so you find out. But no, the idea though is that when you think of things all as one piece, one whole, there are certain, we'll just call them institutions or relationships that God is the one who implemented. Like take the marriage relationship, for instance. God created marriage. God made it. It's the reason marriage exists is because God made it. So,
Yeah.
and so
The reason why anything exists is because God made it so.
but that don't go too far. I'm just
Well,
focusing on.
but
Yes,
that's
you're right. You're right.
that's
You're
the
right.
you have to
Yeah,
do that for the foundation
yeah.
because
So
anything that comes after that, you can't have a well, but, there's no well, but it's everything else is a distorted version of what God has created to be good.
yeah. Okay, fair enough. And so that's actually a great direction to take this anyway. So the idea that I'm trying to communicate is that when we look at something like marriage, for instance, there is meaning in marriage. You can find
Yeah.
meaning, and your life can matter within the context of marriage. That's one area where your life can have meaning. You
Maybe.
can you can have a family. You can raise children. You can raise them a certain way.
Yeah. So,
Your life has
yeah.
impact and
Yes.
matters in that context. Does that make sense?
Yes. But as far as meaning and purpose, that's I don't I don't totally I don't totally agree with that. And the reason is because they are it would be the only way I can describe it is it would be like you get, your first job, and like my very first job was bagging groceries at Lucky's. And you could think my life now has meaning, purpose. I'm working a job. And, but when you're 60 and you're bagging groceries, it's not meaning and purpose anymore. Because you realize through the years that no, this is not meaning or purpose. This is just an entry point into something more, and that. So from that standpoint, because when I think of the idea of meaning and purpose, I don't think of some sort of substantial, some physical idea like my meaning, for example, like to use it in the ultimate spiritual way, is my meaning and purpose is not to be a pastor of a church. That's not where I find meaning and purpose. That's where I find expression of the meaning and purpose of my life, but it isn't the meaning and purpose of my life, and actually nothing materially is the fulfillment of meaning and purpose in our lives. It's the idea of having a meaning, having a purpose, it has a topic associated with it, and that topic is to glorify God. And so that's what's interesting is you have artists who are very good artists, like you mentioned Van Gogh, but then you have other artists that glorify God. You have musicians that are very good, amazing and gifted, but then you have artists that glorify God. And there's a difference. It's not the same. And so the meaning, and purpose idea is really more about glorifying God along the way of doing the other things that you're doing in life. The things that you're doing are not the meaning and purpose. It's the glorifying of God along the way. That's the key. Coming, to give a typical, Christian experience, that would, is what the classic idea of, you pray, you read your Bible, you go to church, you tell other people about Jesus, and you're a giver, you're charitable. And so those five things those are the big five of Christianity. Well, you can pray without meaning or purpose. You can read your Bible without meaning or purpose. You can go to church without meaning or purpose. You can tell other people about Jesus without meaning or purpose, and you can be a giver without meaning or purpose. Mm-hmm. And so it's not the thing itself. It's the like I said, it's more of a topic than an actual state of being.
So Okay, so talking about marriage again,
Uh-huh.
what I was going to say is you can find meaning within that context, but you can also not.
No, you can express meaning in that context.
Okay, so the difference is expressing and finding.
Yeah, because like I said, the idea you're going back to that idea that finding meaning has some sort of thing. So I use the word substance, mean physical substance is that there's somehow okay, I realize why I was created. I was created for marriage. No, no, you weren't. Oh, I finally found what I was created to be a husband, and that's my purpose in life. No, it's not. And on and on and on. So you can go to everything like that and say that I'm a pastor. I found the meaning and the purpose of my life. It was to be a pastor. No, it's the wrong way at looking at meaning and purpose. Meaning and purpose is like I said, it's a topic. It's a I'm going to glorify God with my life. And how am I going to glorify God? I'm going to glorify God with whatever comes along. If as a husband, as a father, as a pastor, all of these things are about being glorifying to God. That's why if you are a husband or a father or a pastor, you're hopefully getting better all the time. You haven't just become one. I'm a husband. I'm a pastor. I'm a father. I've achieved it. I have kids. I have a wife, and I have a church. So I'm a pastor, and I'm a father, and I'm a husband. Well, maybe, but not necessarily. Because that's not. Those are they're things like being a electrician, or an engineer or a developer. They're all titles of life, but they're not none of those things is the meaning or purpose is any more or less than any other. I can find meaning and purpose through engineering. I can find meaning and purpose through being a husband, being a wife. I can find I should express, not find, because what I'm getting away from the idea of finding is this finality, that there's this kind of finality to it. That's it. I've found it. I've got it. That's all there. It's not that kind of thing. When I say find meaning and purpose, I mean really expressing meaning and purpose. That's probably the better way of describing it, because there's no completion to it. That's the point that I'm making, is there's no completion to it. There's going to be something else. So you get married, you get used to being married, you're good, you're a husband, and it's like but that's not your purpose in life. You realize that right away. You realize, no, there's still more to my life. And being a husband and an engineer or a pastor or whatever you are, all those things are, you still get to places in your life where you realize, no, there's more. There's more to my purpose. There's more to the meaning of my life. And like I said, the meaning has to do with glorifying God. That's where you find meaning and purpose, is in glorifying God. So it doesn't matter what it is that you do, as much as why you're doing it. And so that's the important thing. And that's why. So because the reason why I say is find is this way. I found this for me. Expression is the other way. This I'm giving away. Mm-hmm. So you're expressing meaning and purpose. You're not finding meaning and purpose, because it's somehow this is fulfilling my meaning and my purpose in life. It's not. It's an opportunity to express meaning and purpose. Mm-hmm. So it goes the other way.
I see. So the difference is finding and expression. The difference between the two. Because I was using the word find.
Yeah. Well, find is going this way. Gotcha. Expression is going that way. Okay. And we can say, but we do use it that way. I understand. That's why I clarified it. Is we do say, you could find meaning in life by doing such and such. But really what we mean is you can discover that you can do, and express things.
So do you think that that's like, do you think that that's like the disparity between how humans pursue meaning and purpose?
Well, that
we're constantly looking for that finality.
That's really, I think, where the problem lies, is the idea that we think that we're going to arrive, at something, at some purpose and meaning. We're just gonna all of a sudden, it's like, So you go to grade school, you're looking forward to going to middle school. You go to middle school, you're looking forward to going to high school. You're in high school, you're looking forward to going to college or university, and on and on. And then after you finish your university, you're looking forward to doing this, and you're looking forward to getting married, and you're looking forward to this. And so all these things that we're looking forward to, once we get them, they're not the thing that we thought they were. We think the bus is going to stop, the doors are going to be open, and we're going to walk out into something that we're going to just be there now forever. And there's no such place. It's just we get off and realize we haven't quite got to where we want to go, and we got to get the next bus. And so, or train or plane or whatever it may be, on the road to destiny. Destiny isn't something that we achieve from the standpoint as we fulfill destiny. We use these kinds of terms, but the truth is that you don't really, when it comes to meaning, purpose, destiny, all those kinds of words, they really don't end until you're dead. Although otherwise you should still be progressing in those things rather than it being an end in themselves. But it's usually the other way around. Is we're looking at things and we're thinking, oh, I got this, I got that. I got a certain amount of money now, and I still feel like there's more to life, that I haven't experienced. Well, because there is. And there will always be more to life than you experience, because this life is about the next life. It's not about this life. This life, you don't get to a place to where, okay, fine, you got it.
So the question that came up, do you think people are really looking for satisfaction in what they're calling their sense of purpose? To clarify, they're looking for purpose, but are probably confusing it with satisfaction.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's exactly that exactly is the problem, is the idea of meaning and purpose equals personal satisfaction. And yeah.
What is the difference between the two? Meaning, purpose, satisfaction.
Well, meaning and purpose is just that. It's meaning and purpose objective. It's outside of you. It's not your meaning, your purpose, and that's one of the difficulties with modern Christianity. Is modern Christianity has done the same thing, has taken all the terms. Here we get 4 gospels, we get 4 different stories by 4 different authors about how Jesus died on a cross. And yet we still want to know how we can not only not die on the cross, but how we can leverage the cross to our personal advantage. We just don't get this. We don't get what happened at all. I mean, it's not even close to the reality of why Jesus died on the cross. Here we are, we're sinners, in need of a savior. God comes in the form of man, dies on a cross so that we can have eternal life. And what do we want to do with that? Benefit. It's like, we don't want to be thankful. We don't want to understand and discover the meaning of it and find out what he wants from us in response to what he has done for us. No. How can I leverage this? It's your typical capitalistic thinking. It's like, okay, so how can we make money off of this? It's like, this is a great idea. How can we make money off of it? I remember growing up having ideas about stuff. And that was always the, actually, even to this day, I just a couple of times that I thought about it is, I did this, I did that, I did the other thing. Isn't this great? I'm going to give it away. Why? Why don't you take it here and do this with it? And you could probably make money out of it with it. It's like, why does everything have to be about money? Why does everything have to be about self and self-satisfaction? And that, because the reason why money is that thing is because it's the only competitor to God. And so worldly people try to leverage money. Christians try to leverage God and what he's done for them. But they're both doing the same thing, trying to satisfy themselves. Neither one of them really gets what life is all about. And so, yeah, absolutely, that is a perfect conclusion for that. As many people they want meaning and purpose in life. They want to discover meaning and purpose, but with the intention of being satisfied, because that's the problem, is they're not satisfied. But when you understand what meaning and purpose is, you realize that this is a life, um, well, a life. It's literally just a life to live. Not it's not an item to possess. It's a life to live.
So do you think that that's kind of what was happening with this rich young ruler as he comes up to Jesus looking for something different than what
Well,
he
I
was
think,
asking
yeah,
for?
I honestly, I think his that probably again, we're speculating here, so
Yeah.
it's a bit of opinion, but I think that his whole point of view was with the idea of satisfaction. What must I do in order to gain eternal life? It wasn't so much whether he really wanted eternal life or not. That wasn't the issue. The issue wasn't, I want to have eternal life, because when it came down to actually paying the cost in order to receive eternal life, he wasn't willing to do that. He just wanted to know there must be something I can do. And that's going to just, you could replace that with, eternal satisfaction. That's probably more what he was asking about. What must I do to earn eternal satisfaction, more than the idea of eternal life? Because when Jesus gives him the cost and says, sell all that you have and follow me, it's like, well, that's what you wanted, right? You wanted eternal life. This is how you get it. It's like, no, I didn't want eternal life. What I wanted is I wanted something more than what I already have. You're telling me to get rid of things. I'm saying I want more than what I already have.
Uh-huh. Okay, so let's delve into this idea of glorifying God. What does that really mean?
Well, the idea of glorifying God is really focused on the idea of bringing God into this is something I have, even though I've been a Christian for 40 years, it's something I'm always working on. I'm always trying to make better. Is the reality of God, is to get people to see the reality of God. It's not as if God is hiding. God isn't hiding. It's that he doesn't look the way we think he looks. And so we can be looking right at him and still not be able to see him because we don't know what he looks like. And so that's always something that I'm trying to do, is trying to help people to see what God looks like through my life. And the things that I do and how I live my life. So people can look and say, I can say, well, the reason why I do this, and the reason why I think this way, and the reason why I do this is because this is how God thinks. This is how God views life. This is what, is important to God. These are God's priorities, etc. All those kinds of things.
Okay, and so what is that, give me like an idea of what that looks like practically in pursuit. We're trying to glorify God with our lives. What does that mean? So we talk about all these different forums of expression. How do you glorify God in a marriage? How do you glorify God in
so I
money?
mentioned,
You know what I mean?
I mentioned how that there are people that are, artists who are really good artists, and then there are artists that glorify God, in their art. When it's the only way I can describe it commonly is, the idea of that sense of transcendence, the bringing people into the experience of transcendence. And that's my goal in preaching and every service, is that it would be an opportunity for transcendence, that people would come and be in a whole different world. They would be, transported into a whole new world. So when they walk through those doors, it's not about, that's why I have, over the years have been contending for this idea that in church shouldn't just be, your typical, meeting of the friends, like you would like, for example, outside of work, you meet with your friends outside of work. You may, if you're really into it, you may talk about your job, but if you're not into it, you'll be talking about other things and you'll just forget about your job. And that's so you have that kind of those two groups, sitting out in the parking lot talking. They're either talking about the project they're working on or, in work, or they're talking about something completely unrelated to work. It's not usually, oh yeah, like in work, backwards and forwards kind of a thing. You're either in work or you're not in work. And I want that kind of atmosphere in church, for people to be able to leave behind the world for a little bit, and to be able to just be in church and to be thinking about God and the things of God and asking questions about the things of God, and learning, developing a greater understanding of who God is. And that is what it means to glorify God, when God is brought into the in a greater degree into the picture of your life. So it's not, you're not playing Where's Waldo with your life. Is it Wally or Waldo here?
Waldo,
Waldo,
yeah.
yeah, it's Wally in England. Where's Wally? Where's Waldo? And you're looking through, and some pictures of, so many things that look alike, it's hard to see. Oh, there it is. It may take you a good couple of tries to do it. You know, but when you're doing it right, there's no where's Waldo. God is right there. You clearly can see that this is God. It's not just, oh, what about this and what about that and what about the other thing, and oh, what about this, and it's no. There's a clarity. There's a clarity. This is God. God is here. As I mentioned about in my sermon on Wednesday or Sunday about the devil, and one of the, it's funny because people don't have a problem talking about Jesus, talking about what he stood for, his morals and all that kind of stuff, and talking about disciples and Christianity in the first century and stuff like that. But one thing that's really difficult for people to talk about with any kind of seriousness is the devil. In a true sense. You can talk about the metaphoric devil. You can talk about your demons and things like that. But the idea of a real devil, an opposing force to God, Jesus, it's a hard thing for people to talk about with seriousness. And there's many things like that in Christianity that is very difficult for Christians to talk about with seriousness. Like you wouldn't, in church, you might say, oh, that's, somebody explains some situation. Think, man, that sounds like the devil. We need to pray about that. But somebody could say a similar circumstance in work, but amongst non-believers or in your family or something like that, where people are not Christian. It's like, you're thinking, man, this sounds like the devil. But you're not going to say that because it sounds stupid. So you're not going to say it. But in church, oh yeah, no problem. We can say it. But so glorifying God is being able to talk like you're in church, outside of church. There's no difference between the two. There's no, and that is the reason why so many young kids leave church, when they get older, is for that very reason, is they've been raised in a home where they talk about God in church, but they don't talk about God outside of church, and everything's different. How they live outside of church is not the same way as they, quote, live inside the church. It's completely different. And when the kids get old enough, they realize, wow, this is ridiculous. Why should I do this? Mm-hmm. There's nothing real about it, because they've never discovered it for themselves. Their parents have done a great job of inoculating them from the truth.
So dig a little deeper into that. I'm catching the way you talk, obviously the way you live. There's an example you're setting, but what is the general message you're trying to communicate in all that? You're just talking about God. You're just talking about the things of God, the Bible. The church. We're talking about church. We're talking about
Yeah,
I don't know, songs you sang.
See, this is one of those difficulties of reality that I'm talking about, is that if I was to, let me see, get a name here. It's somebody who's popular and neutral.
Does that exist?
It's hard to find somebody like that. Yeah, it's very difficult to find somebody like that.
Neutral. What do you mean by neutral, actually?
Well, let's just say, the point that I'm making is, so you have some, if you're talking about some famous person, and you say, well, you want to tell other people about this famous person, so what are you gonna do? You're gonna just talk about them? It's like, well, if they're not there, yes, obviously, but that means something, but when you say, what are you gonna do? Just talk about God? In many Christians, it doesn't mean anything. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean anything. You're just gonna talk about God as if that's unimportant, which indicates that God's not real. Even though he is real, the issue is not his reality, but within the framework of that particular individual, God is not real. because they can't see that talking about God is as effective as talking about a person. You know, that because you don't when you say, oh, when I talk about them, it's not the same as talking about an inanimate object. When you're talking about a person and talking about an inanimate object, you're talking about two different things. You know, what are you going to just talk about? You know, how great Coca-Cola is? I mean, you know, so you're going to get people to convince to Coca-Cola. No, but you know, there's not a whole lot you can say about Coca-Cola. There's nothing to it. You know, you can maybe describe the flavor, but there's not a lot of substance to it. But when you're talking about a human being, you're talking about something that is filled with substance, you know, and talking about them is absolutely how you're going to convince other people of their, not only of their existence, but their reality and who they are, and glorifying them. Yes, you're going to do that. That's what's going to happen. But then we take that into the realm of God, who is also a personality, but now we make him into an inanimate object by saying, you know, what, are you going to just talk about him? You know, whatever. You know, it's the message that's being sent is God's just like an inanimate object. Talking about him is just as, you know, valuable as talking about a candle. You know, and so you've actually made it harder for yourself to now be able to communicate to people about who God is by doing that. You know, because
I've heard people
God's
talk
an
about
inanimate object.
I've heard people talk about Jesus. I've heard people talk about God, and there's some people who talk about God, and there's like you can tell they're interested.
Yeah, because he's a person
Right.
to them.
So yeah.
And what about the ones that you don't think are interested? He's not a person. He's an inanimate object.
So there is a difference in how you talk about him. That's kind of what I'm after.
Yeah.
What is the difference? What is the so you're saying one talks like he's an inanimate object.
Yeah, just a theory, you know, a theory
Okay,
or
that's
a
a better thing to
concept
understand.
or a, you know, a history lesson, you know, it's all those kinds of things rather than who he really is. And that is to be able to do that, to be able to talk about God and who he is comfortably is very difficult for many people.
How do you, so like I can talk about Donald Trump, but only to a certain level. Like what makes the difference between somebody who's, you know,
You
a
can only
family
talk
member.
About, yeah, you can only talk about Donald Trump to a certain level. But now you're hitting on another point of what I'm referring to, is that idea is, yeah, you can only talk about certain people because you don't know them.
Okay.
And so you can't say a whole lot about them. But there are other people that you can say that stuff about because you know them well. And when you are talking about them, people know you know them well. And so they may not have ever met this person, but they know this person's real by the fact that you are talking so comfortably and knowledgeably about who they are. Not concepts and theologies and things like that, but who they really are.
Okay, so we've touched on speech. What's another avenue of glorifying God and how you do it? How do you accomplish it?
Oh, trying to get some tea here.
Go ahead, pour your tea. We're not. This isn't like a movie where we clip between spaces. You know what I mean? Where the words are just back and forth, back and forth.
I've been trying to wait for you to start talking so the camera goes off of me and on you, and then I can deal with it. Because I knew it was going to be a bit of a trouble because I got stuff stuck in my tea.
Oh boy, yeah. Okay, well, everybody can watch Pastor Ford struggle with his canteen. First time he's
actually,
ever brought
they're
a
not
canteen.
watching. They're actually not watching because you're talking enough to keep the camera on
This
you.
is quite literally the first time I've ever seen you bring a canteen into church. Period.
Well,
Period.
I did it. There's a reason why I did it.
I mean, clearly, obviously, there's obviously a reason you did it.
Yeah, there's a reason why.
Very good.
The reason is because I got this. It's the best tea I've ever had in my life.
And he didn't want to share it.
And I didn't want to share it.
Brewed
No,
it
that's not
beforehand
why.
and brought it here.
That's not why. No. But it's because it comes from a seed that's about this big.
A seed.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what it is. I mean, it looks like a seed. It literally looks like a seed. It's probably like a
A pod or something else.
It grows. It grows and hangs off leaves.
Yeah, okay,
It's not
so
a fruit.
fungus.
It's not a vegetable. I don't know what else does that kind of thing, but that's what it is.
Pastor Ford has
it's
started trying the psychedelic.
It's a growing tea ball,
Shrooms
and they're
that
about
we've
that
been-
big. Actually, they're sold in China for medicine.
Really?
Yeah, they're actually
Oh, this
sold
is
as
like
medicine. You buy them in a pharmacy.
this is real
You actually
food.
go to the pharmacy to buy them. But
Gosh.
it's ancient Chinese secret stuff. I mean, you get this like 4-pack of these big balls. There are like 4 of them in a big plastic. It's in a plastic like a food container, and they're about that big. And so I didn't. I usually cut it up into pieces, but I was running. I had to run out the door, and so I thought, oh, I know what I'll do, because I wanted to have some of it, and so I had one like pod left, and so I just took the pod, stuck it in there, filled the whole thing up with the water because I knew it would work, and that's what happened. So anyway,
Okay. You're done pouring your tea.
I'm done pouring my tea.
So the question is, what else? So obviously the way
Yeah.
you talk. So now we're all talking
Well,
about
your
what
life.
makes your life
So
matter,
it's
right?
it's like anything. If you're talking about a person and what a person means to you, it's all the same. It's all going to be the same. The issue of this is the thing that's it's so difficult. Not to explain, it's so difficult because so few Christians actually can do this, and it makes me wonder on Judgment Day. How many people are going to be shocked. Like I've shared it before, but there used this play, this Heaven's Gates and Hell's Flames, and it was a play that is done by Christians. Okay, it's Christians that do this play, but the way that the play is done is not, you don't use lines, and so it's something that can be propagated other places. And so usually what it does is a team of people will come, they'll get the people in the church to get together and become a part. They'll take on a persona, and then they will actually be the ones doing the dialogue. They'll work the dialogue out for the play, and then they'll put the play on, and then there's like a judgment. And so, but like I said, these are all Christians. And so one Christian playing a Christian in the play stands before God and says, "You are real." I'm like, that's exactly how most people believe Christians are. Is that Christians are just clueless individuals that they just hope this is all going to mean something when it's all said and done. They hope that when they die that there actually is going to be a heaven, or else they have wasted their lives because their lives are on hold. They don't do anything, they don't go anywhere, they don't be anything because their lives are on hold, because they want to make sure they're going to make it into heaven when God judges them. And then, oh, you are real. So this thing was good after all, and I am going to go to heaven. So it was all worth it. But you don't have a clue right now. You don't have a clue that any of it is worth anything at all. And that's not what happened to me by any stretch of the imagination, Adriana. No, I met Jesus. He came into my life. He changed me. He doesn't have a physical body that I've seen. He's a spiritual being, but he is real. And it doesn't matter that he's not a physical being. He's a spiritual being and he is real. And you can know him, and we can know him because we are also spiritual beings. We're physical and spiritual beings. And so it's just the spiritual part of us is dead. But when the spiritual part of us comes alive, we can have relationship with spiritual beings. But this, to be able to talk about this kind of stuff comfortably, that's what I'm talking about. It just sounds weird to people who are they're Christian in name only. They're not spiritual. That part of them hasn't come alive.
Yeah. So I want to we only have a few more minutes. I want to try and nail into some of these other categories, because the way you speak clearly has impact on the meaning of your life, the purpose of your life is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Glorifying God. Okay. What does that look like with money? In the area of money, you said that was the only other competitor. So let's zoom in on that for a second. We only have 8 minutes left.
Okay.
7 minutes left.
Well, because the idea of money is the how you evaluate money. It's not that money is not valuable. It's that how you evaluate money. It's what you do. What is the criteria whereby you are determining the value of money. And that's a thing that for me as a Christian is that it's been a very interesting journey, because my experience with money has been how much trust do I put in God when there's a dollar value on the line. Like I can trust God for $5, but can I trust God for $500? And it's like, so the idea of giving, being generous, uh, giving while I'm saving for something else, something like that, and okay, okay, 500, okay, I can make it to 500. Okay, well, what about 5,000? And then going through that, that same process. So can I, where are you as a believer when it comes to the idea of believing God, trusting God when there is a need or a lack that is at a certain dollar amount, and that is the money part. That's where the money part comes in, is ultimately, and it's been growing over the years. I can honestly say when I first got saved, I didn't care that much about money because I only needed way back when the dinosaurs were around, I only needed $50 a month because I lived in a house with 10 guys. $50 a month was fine. I made $50 a day, so it wasn't a big deal. That wasn't a big thing, for me to believe God, to put it in that kind of terms for money, and so I could give. I literally would just take my wallet back in the day when you used to have those green paper things that looked like they had pictures on them and stuff, and they had their $1, $5. And I would just take all of those out of my wallet because you used to carry a lot of those with you. You didn't have credit cards back then, and throw them in the on the offering. And it's like, and there it goes, and it's never to be seen again. And there's no real credit. There's no real anything. It's like, no big deal. I don't need the money. And it was real easy to do that, because I didn't need the money. But as I got older and God began to challenge me about giving and being liberal in my giving more and more and more, then all of a sudden I'm not only digging into my excess, but I'm digging into my necessity. And as I'm digging into my necessity, and I'm digging lower and lower and lower into my necessity, and I'm not talking about going into debt or something like that. I'm talking about from the standpoint of bills need to be paid, things need to be done. God deals with me about maybe giving in an offering or giving to something or to somebody. And I have this obvious need. And then to be able to give it and just rely on God to meet that need, which is what happens. And so that's another way that I, try to help people to understand the reality of God, is that I don't ever worry about, well, let me put it this way. I don't worry about certain amounts of money because I have learned over the years to trust God, because I have deficited myself in such a way that I've put myself in that place where I know God has to meet the need. And then after becoming a pastor, that even became more, because now it was, being a pastor in the Bay Area, the most expensive place in the world to do a church, and all that's going on with that. And just being able to trust God and just say, no, God's going to help us with this. It's going to, when we're, not when we're living off of savings. There's nothing sinful about having savings, but savings, when you're living off of it, isn't going to last forever. And so the faith that I have that, no, God's going to help us, that this, we have this money, but when this money runs out, God will still help us. And so that's how. That's how. And so I'm living at to try to put things in its right perspective. I'm living at a level as if I had more money than I do. And that has grown, that dollar amount has grown over the years. It's been as I live as if I have this much money in the bank. It's the only way I can really try to explain it to somebody who's not experienced it. It's as if I had a certain amount. So like when you have $50 in the bank, in savings, you're really not ready for anything. And so you're really careful about, what you buy and stuff like that. But then when you've got two or three, 400, then you got a little bit more space. And then when it becomes 2 or 3,000, then you've got even more space. And when it becomes, 50, 100,000, you're not going to the grocery store going, okay, well, the pears are on sale, so I need to get some pears. Well, pears is probably not a good one, but some staple, is on sale. So I'm going to buy this, like people with toilet paper, it's like people are they're going to go buy toilet paper because they're afraid of running out of toilet paper. And to me, that's I would love to know the absolute complete understanding, not just the suspicious ideas and thoughts that have is why in the world people hoard, why they feel good about themselves when they hoard toilet paper. I can't get my head around it. But I'm, doing the opposite and looking at money like toilet paper, but not valuable toilet paper. Used to be you say that, oh, it's just like buying toilet paper. Now you can't say that anymore because people are like, what do you mean? I got a closet full of it because I'm afraid I'm going to run out.
Okay, so we're at time, but to conclude all of this is no matter what forum
I still have a whole glass.
Okay, well, yeah, we got an off-topic question. Actually, we'll ask. Actually, there's a whole podcast for that off-topic question called "The Truth About 666." By the way, the question is: I've heard people joke about 666. It seems maybe it's clarify off-topic. It seems that maybe they do believe but are afraid to admit it publicly. Could this thinking be true? And before we get to that question, how do you know that in all of this, you're actually doing something that matters? What is the evidence of that? Or is that just something you might not know?
Well, no, you know it. You know it. But some of the things that we're talking about, they're reciprocal. And so as I'm doing these things and glorifying God with my life, I am receiving the fulfillment and the sense. I was going to use the word satisfaction, but it's not.
Yes, we would have been all the way back to the beginning of the podcast.
It's because there's a righteous satisfaction and an unrighteous, a selfish satisfaction, and so they're not. That's a word that can be used in two different contexts. But that's not the one that I want to use, because I don't want that you just said that and have to go into a whole thing about how you shouldn't have said that because you said that was wrong. The idea of having a sense of fulfillment, it's a satisfaction really is the wrong word, to be honest, because it is a sense of fulfillment. There's not in degrees. I'm going backwards and forwards. I'm thinking about talking to people who are binary and thinking linearly at the same time, and going, actually you can do it this way, and you can't do it this way binary, but you can do it linearly. It's hard to work that through. But anyway, so the idea is being fulfilled. At
some point on satisfaction.
Being fulfilled. No, the idea of fulfilling, a sense of fulfillment of destiny, of meaning and purpose. You have that sense. It's not a completion. That's the key. It's not a completion. It's not like, oh, I am totally and completely meaning, have meaning and purpose. I completely do. I just totally do. It's not that kind of a thing. It's a progressive thing. I'm trying to think of somebody.
It's
like owning a house.
I'm trying to relate to this.
It's like owning a house.
Are you talking about
you're paying bills? You're paying if you think about the house is yours. It's yours as long as you keep paying for it. It's yours, and so you can have the satisfaction that it is yours, but you don't have the satisfaction that you paid for it.
Right. It's not done.
It's not done.
So it's like you're doing the right thing continuously.
Yeah, and it has, and there is a sense of continual satisfaction that you're paying the bill. You're doing the right thing. You're glorifying God with your life, and there's a sense of pleasure that you feel from God. It's a God pleasure, God being pleased with your life. Like, it's funny because as a pastor, it's really easy. I thought I preached this sermon years ago, and it really is over and over again. I thank God I'm a pastor, and that I became a pastor, because I get to watch humanity at its worst. And no matter what's going on in my life, it's never as bad as somebody else. So there's always somebody else is doing worse than me. And my parents told me that growing up, don't feel sorry for yourself. There's always somebody who's worse off than you. Well, I didn't know that. Well, when you become a pastor, you get to know them because they come to your church or they call you on the phone and they want counseling or whatever. So you actually do meet people who are worse than you and probably you will never be that bad off. And it's like sad, but it's reality. But there's no bottom to it, so it's not like nobody else can have that same sense of, hey, I'm going somewhere. God's using my life. There's a blessing of God on my life. There's a favor of God. I know God's with me. I know God's pleased with my life. All those kinds of things are there, not because of what he does for me, but because we have a relationship. There's a relationship. And as long as I know I'm doing well. Here's a little tidbit for somebody out there who may be really struggling with this. I know that when I have a sense of that I'm doing well, I know I'm in a good relationship with Jesus. Because there are times in my life, well, actually, I should reverse that. There are times in my life that I'm questioning God about something. And that's a time when I'm not doing well, by definition. It's a time that I'm not doing well because there's something wrong in my relationship that I'm questioning or doubting my relationship with him. And so when I'm boasting about Jesus, that's usually how I know that I'm doing well, is because I want to. I want to boast about Jesus. I want to talk about Jesus. I want to talk about the good things of Jesus. And, that's why I mentioned this conference, this last Prescott conference in January was such a landmark for me, because just before that, I was really struggling with things. And then it was like there was this clarity about things. And I realized, wow, I don't need to struggle with this. This is right on target. This is right where things should be, and seeing God move and work in things and understanding that. And it's not just God. I don't want to give out too many statements that don't sound like I've completed what I'm saying here, but I'm doing that. I know that I'm doing well when I am able to communicate Jesus comfortably and freely without feeling that sense of, I don't understand this, or I don't understand that, or I wish this wouldn't be like this, or I wish it wouldn't be like that. I know I'm in a good place when I've overcome that. Because as Christians, we go through times like that, which are trials. They're demonic mind games that are going on and trying to get you to focus on the wrong thing. And it's not, why doesn't God do this, and why isn't God like that, and why isn't God the other thing? It's the fly on the penny. Is just, why isn't God doing this? And then when you can zoom out and you can see the world, you realize, well, that's not even that significant. That's not even that important. So it's not a question of God doing something that you don't understand and then coming to this understanding of why He does it. Sometimes it's just understanding that it wasn't even important to begin with. Mm-hmm. We think oh no, this is very, very important. And then, we get it and it's not so important. Or we don't get it and something else comes along, and then all of a sudden, no, that's important. And so it's the ability for us to be able to focus on the big picture. And that's how that's how I know that I'm doing well in my relationship with God, is because my eyes are on the big picture. I can see the more important issues of life rather than the little silly thing that I might be, wondering about. Okay, I'm done.
And you still have some tea left.
Oh, it's hard to talk and drink tea at the same time. You're supposed to be talking.
Am I? Is that a thing? I thought this podcast was me asking questions and you talking. All right. Well, that's it for tonight. Thanks for joining. And as always, we really do appreciate you joining live. If you're watching after the fact, thank you for taking the time to watch or listen. And if you want to, if you have questions, comments, feel free to use the comment section afterwards. And as always, we'll put some information on the screen here in a minute that has some of our events upcoming. We always have a midweek service on Wednesday nights. We are a church, in case you didn't catch that. And we have a live service every Wednesday night at 7 o'clock here at our church building in San Carlos. And so if you're in the San Francisco Bay Area, we encourage you to come join us. Otherwise, stop by next week, 7 o'clock, same time next week on Tuesday night for another podcast, another topic. And we'll be there then.